This is Your Other Brothers Podcast.
Welcome, friends, to Your Other Brothers Podcast, navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together, and also apart. This is a historic podcast because for the first time that I can recall, first time that we are all in different locations. That never happens. We are always so communal on the YOBcast. But today, from the jewel of Northeast Georgia, my name is Tom. What's up, everybody? Joining me from the city of Oaks, it's my brother Ryan.
Hey everyone.
And there's a big thunderstorm brewing, isn't there?
Yeah, it's very moody over here, so maybe if you listen closely, you can pick up on some of the mood going on here in Raleigh.
My four-ish presence is still there in the city of Oaks.
You're here
manifesting.
in spirit. It's very dark
manifesting
outside.
in the clouds, yes. And then also joining us from the Midwest, no word yet on the weather patterns there, it's our brother Jacob. What's up, Jacob?
Hey guys, it's good to be here. Currently it is raining, but it's a nice, gentle, calming rain. So it's still a bit moody, but not quite as bad as Oakland.
Would you say it's more of a lull, more of a lulling rain?
Yes, it's a dreary lullabying rain, as they say.
Lullabying rain.
In the Midwest.
Very nice, very nice. Well, y'all, I'm glad you're here because we're not done talking about emotional attachment. We got more stuff to say, and we're going to keep talking about it here tonight with a very special guest. I feel like I don't want to denigrate anybody on this podcast. I'll just put myself out there. I don't want to degrade myself because I think I have stories to tell. I think I have wisdom to bestow. But I will readily admit I'm limited. I do not know everything. I know very little in the grand scheme of things. And I'm going to assume y'all are the same. I assume y'all are also very smart and have stories to share, but not wizards who know everything.
I mean, we understand at this point that we are no longer special, and we've just come to accept that. So no worries.
Perfect. So that's where it's really great to bring in outside voices and outside wisdom and outside knowledge and stories to share. And so we have a very special guest coming on a little bit later in this show. So stay tuned because we're going to talk all about emotional attachment and dive even deeper than we've already dived. Yes.
Doven?
Doven. Yeah, deeper than we've already
Deeper than we've ever dove in.
That sounds about right. But first, before we get to the special guest, before we get to more emotional attachment, y'all, how are you doing? We have some updates to get to. I know Ryan was on a train, and Jacob was on a boat.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in a
car.
bed. I was in a car itching with poison ivy, which thankfully I have now fully recovered. My pink scales, my pink calamine scales have melted off, and I am reborn into a new Tom with literal new skin. It's a glorious thing. The human body is amazing, y'all.
Agreed.
Indeed.
Agreed and indeed. So yeah, who wants to go first and tell me about your adventure? Y'all had some travels.
I'll go first because I'm sure Jacob's is going to be more exciting than mine. I rode on a train for
Ryan.
a total of 20 hours. It was about what I expected. It wasn't super glamorous, but it was pretty chill. Except I managed to each time sit within one row of kind of the most obnoxiously annoying people on the train. So, there was a snack car, and, when they would come back to their seats from the snack car, I'd leave my seat and go to the snack car, and then, we'd switch places because I didn't want to be near them. So, but it was cool. It was amazing. I was surprised how fast the train would go sometimes, especially through the Northeast. I downloaded a speedometer app on my phone that uses the GPS to tell you how fast you're going, and through some of the the stretches in New Jersey, we were going 115, 120 miles an hour, and it was kind of wild because we would just zoom right through like train stations, like right by platforms with people on them, like an arm's length away. And it's like, bruh, we're going 120 miles an hour. Like, stand back. But yeah, so it was cool. I did not write anything as Tom suggested. I felt I have a hard time writing when I feel like somebody can read what I'm writing. And so public spaces like a train or planes are never good for that for me.
Oh, I see. So you need to go into a hole in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, I do. Or scare everyone else out of the coffee shop.
Well, I definitely need chaos around me. That's why I do all my writing in coffee shops. But I do wonder, and I mentioned this on the last episode, I wonder if I were on a train, if I would just be so mesmerized by the sights. Was it like a pretty train ride? Like, did you go through some scenic areas, or was it more so just industrial or wasteland?
It was either kind of industrial, or through a lot of the southeast, you're just going through like a corridor of trees. So you just saw like banks of shrubs on either side.
Gotcha.
Sometimes you're going through little towns and such.
Well, that's cool. I would still love to go on a long train ride like that someday, regardless of the scenery around me. I bet that was aesthetically enjoyable. Well, very good. Jacob, meanwhile, just as exciting, you went to Alaska.
Indeed, yes.
On a boat.
Yes, I went on my first ever cruise
Wow.
to the last frontier, or the final frontier. I don't ever know which one was actually ever that Alaska was ever referred to as, or
one of those is
which one is
space.
only used for Star Trek. Yeah, I think space is the final frontier, and Alaska's the last frontier. I might just be making this up. Tom, is that accurate?
That sounds about
Is any
right.
of that true?
One
that
of
I
them
just
is
said?
space and one of them is Alaska.
Okay.
I'm not sure which came first.
Good. Anyways, it was awesome. We had, from what we had heard going in, an Alaskan cruise is kind of risky in that, like, you can have really rainy, crappy weather the entire time, and it makes it just a whole lot less pleasant. We had beautiful, gorgeous days basically every day. So like low 70s, sunny. It was amazing. And Alaska is a very beautiful place that I learned, and cruising life is rather sweet. And I don't normally eat a dessert after every meal, but you better bet that I did, and it was excellent.
And you're 30 pounds lighter, right?
I'm 30 pounds lighter. Yes. Yep. I'm in the best shape
Something
of
about
my
being on the
life
sea,
at this
it's
point.
like it impacts you less, right? You're like, you're sort of, it's like being in space. You're more weightless on the water.
Yeah, that's how that works. I did work out with my brother on the first day, and so those were some good intentions that didn't quite last longer than the first day.
Oh,
but
it was nice to start.
it was a good start. Yeah. He did do other things kind of throughout, because he's currently training for a triathlon that he's doing, and so he was actually much more active and intentional. But my motivation and desire kind of went after day one.
Well, what was like? I've never been on a cruise, so enlighten me. Were there like, I picture a cruise having like excellent food and a pool and mini golf and a jacuzzi and
yes,
and like, does it have those activities? Those
it has
accessories?
it has more that you can do on it than I imagined. There wasn't any mini golf, which is sad, but it was so we went with Royal Caribbean on not their biggest ship, but a really big one. So there were 4,900 passengers on this ship, and there were 3 pools and gyms and theaters and restaurants, and I would say that overall, like, your like main like food time and like eating area, like it is definitely quantity over quality. I would say, like, yes, did have some really good stuff, but I would say that for the most part, it's really about you're getting an obscene amount of food at any time than it is like these are the best meals that you've ever had in your life.
That also depends on the cruise line. I think that's Royal Caribbean, but like other cruise lines are going to have higher quality food. What was your favorite port of call?
I would say probably Skagway, because during that port.
Was that a knock on your door, Jacob, that I heard just now?
Yeah, it was, which makes me a little nervous. I don't know why.
You should probably go see who's
Yeah,
there.
can I go check on that? I don't
go
know
check on that.
who would be here. I didn't order food, so it's not Grubhub.
It's definitely not Grubhub. I wish the camera was facing the other way. I would love to see what's happening, right? What you got there, friend?
So I just got a delivery from Grubhub of a styrofoam thing of anchovies and 2 packets of honey. I don't know where they're from. But the lady at the door said, "This was a very strange order." Like, yeah, I didn't make it. Oh my goodness. You guys.
There you go, Jacob. Eat up.
You guys timed that perfectly. Where did I need to know where you found a place to order from where you could just get anchovies. Have a very strong smell.
Don't question my methods. Was your Grubhub delivery person disabled this time?
No, she was very young and vibrant and physically fit. She was just confused because I was confused because I didn't order anything. And she said, "Well, it's already been paid for, so
it has indeed."
Okay.
I'll let you rest easy knowing she was tipped very well, and
that's good.
yeah. And
I hope you didn't spend a lot.
and
on
now
these
you are
little
going
fishies.
to be healthy and vibrant and strong for this podcast.
You're so sweet.
Have you ever had?
I am a bit.
Have you ever had anchovies before?
I have had them on Caesar salad before.
Oh,
Never
okay.
just by their lonesome.
I was really-
Do I dip them? Do I dip them in the honey? Do they take a little swim in the honey? Or do
absolutely.
I drizzle the honey over all of them and sort of mix them up?
They're called.
I don't know.
They're called
I don't wanna do it wrong.
honey chovies, and you just let them swim around for a little bit, and then you slurp them up.
How did you get it to be timed so perfectly?
I gave her explicit instructions to enter your door at 6:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I made sure you were talking during the podcast. This thing was very meticulously
Wow.
planned from the beginning. All right, moving this anchovy-ridden show along. It's time for everyone's favorite intro segment, the triumphant tidbit. What is up with everyone? We've always called it this. It's always been called the triumphant tidbit. And we're going to share some triumphant things, starting with the man with the anchovies and the honeychovies. Jacob, what is your triumphant
sir.
tidbit?
So my triumphant tidbit, or my TT, as we always call it, just for short, little funsies. Because we're going to be continuing with attachment and different attachment styles, I wanted to, as I just came back from vacationing, I wanted to talk about our vacation styles, because as I have learned from being a human for 28 years, everyone enjoys vacation and does vacationing a little bit differently. And so, for instance, when it comes to myself, I usually am more of the relaxation, go with the flow, kind of chill, lower key, while my brother, who is great and an Enneagram 7, needs to be doing something at every moment of every day. And being on a cruise where there are basically unlimited options of things that you can do and be involved in, he got a little overwhelmed. But I think also at the end of it, loved the fact there was always something that he could be doing. However, because we are very different in that way, we do kind of butt heads a little bit when it comes to I don't like to be forced into things on a vacation that I don't like. Even if they're not bad things, I don't like being forced into activities or excursions or what have you. And so I'm curious to hear from the two of you your vacation styles and what that looks like for you guys.
Well, first of all, I don't like how you're framing this as
good versus evil.
I go this way, and I have to deal with my brother who operates
that is
this
accurate.
way.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Whereas I think there's value in both ways of experiencing a vacation. The chill and the not so chill.
No, I understand. Yes. I am thankful for the ways that he does pull me out of my chill to do things that I might not otherwise do. So Nate, thank you. That's an excellent thing.
Yeah, like when I go on vacation, I don't want to just sit in the hotel room and watch Netflix the whole time. Like the world is spinning by. We need to go out and conquer the world. So I probably lean more toward your brother as far as vacation styles go. But I mean, I also enjoy rest. I enjoy chill too. I think there's a place for both. But if you're going to press me into one style or the other, I'm with your brother all the way.
Well, yeah. Also, I don't want to come at this and say that there are only two vacation styles. So I want, if you feel like you have other ones that are more nuanced or different, please, by all means. I don't want to force you into a box that you don't fit in.
Ryan, what box do you fit in?
I'd probably lean more towards Jacob's style, where if I'm going to a destination for the destination, then I'm going to have like 2 or 3 non-negotiables, like things I definitely want to do and see while I'm there. Mm-hmm. And then I'm willing to fill in the rest of the time with other stuff and kind of go with the flow for that. But especially for longer trips or trips with family, I really do need some time to sort of like have to myself and pull away and not be socially engaged with the people I'm vacationing with. And so cruises are really great for that because you can sort of like lose yourself on the ship and like find find something else to do, find somewhere else to go. When I'm not on a boat with family, I find it's helpful to like stay at the house while everyone else goes out and does something, or get out to the coffee shop if I need to. So yeah, I want to do like the few key things that I've decided I want to do, and I'll be pretty gung ho and like I'll make it happen. But then I need to balance that with some alone time as well.
What's your favorite chill activity, Jacob? Like, while your brother's out climbing walls and swimming canals and running marathons, like what are you doing?
Yeah, so there was a part of the ship called the solarium, which was an adults only section, and it's at the front of the ship. It's almost entirely windows, and it's got lounge chairs. It had 4 hot tubs and like 3 little pools that were like heated pools you could kind of lounge in, and there were waiters walking around bringing people drinks. And so there were a few times that I would just go there, and it was quiet, it was peaceful, you could like look out and see beautiful things. And so I would sit in there and read and order a blue margarita and just relax. I loved it.
See, I could do that for 10 minutes. Maybe 20. But then
Really?
I'd be like,
That's it?
I need to go. Yeah, like when we took vacations as a kid, we went to the beach. I mean, this is a whole other rant on beaches. But yeah, no, it's like we would go there to go to the beach and just like lie there on the sand for hours. And I'm like, what are we doing? What is the point of this? I need to go out and do something. So I think there's a lot of contention there with my family.
But you also spend much, I would assume, that when you are reading books, you spend longer than 10 minutes at a time reading something, right?
Not usually, no. Like honestly, lately, the last several years of my life,
okay.
I read for about 10 minutes and I get bored or I fall asleep. It's not a good thing.
enough.
This is a thing I need to work on because I'd love the idea of just being someone who could sit down and read for 3 hours. I want to read more for sure, but the idea of just not moving for that long is just crippling. I don't know.
Okay, understood.
So I think what we've learned here is that we would all be horrible on a vacation together, but that's okay. We'll power through it.
Let's never go on a vacation together.
Yeah.
Tom, what is your triumphant tidbit?
I'm glad you asked, Jacob. My
You're
triumphant
welcome,
tidbit
Tom.
is very simple. I'm going to cut right to the chase. There's no big long story. There's no there's no news article. There's nothing I'm pulling from. This is just straight out of my hat, a get to know you question, and it goes with this concept of triumph. I want to know, when was the last time each of you felt mighty? When was the last time? This isn't like a silly question. Like, when did you feel like, dang, like I did that, or I'm a man, or I did that. Like, what comes to mind as something where you just felt super proud? I mean, you can spin this any way you want. Like, I felt super proud in this moment. I felt blah, 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 blah. But I was, for some reason today, really stuck on this word, this concept of triumph and might. So I want to know when the last time you felt that was.
So I think the easy answer for me comes from CrossFit. And
This is just a segue into talking about CrossFit.
yeah.
Always.
This is now a CrossFit
Always
podcast.
comes back to CrossFit.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Tell us about CrossFit, Ryan.
If you're not familiar with CrossFit, every day you have a workout of the day, and they have like an RX version, so that's like the prescribed version, and then they have a scaled version because the prescribed version is not something a normal, typical human could usually do, unless you've been doing CrossFit for a while. So people who go and like do CrossFit for like a year or two before they can do the RX workouts regularly. But a few weeks ago, the RX workout was not like something that was totally out of my range of capability, and I tried it, and I managed to do the prescribed workout, and it involved carrying a heavy medicine ball above my head for hundreds of meters, and also doing a bunch of Russian twists, which is like a core workout you do on the ground, and then some like back extensions on this one machine. So it wasn't like, as far as RX workouts go, it wasn't super crazy. It's probably the easiest one ever, but I was like so proud of myself, and I felt so accomplished. Like, wow, these 6 months or whatever in CrossFit have really paid off.
That's awesome. I've never done an RX workout. I haven't done CrossFit in a few months now with all my instability, but I'm hopeful. My goal when I first started was like, I just want to can I just do the women's weight? And even that was really hard for me. And then there were some workouts toward the end of my run with CrossFit that I was able to do the women's weight like prescription, and that was encouraging. I was like, okay, I'm propelling, I'm moving in some direction, and that was great too.
I also feel very mighty doing any of the Olympic lifts, like snatches and jerks and deadlifts, all that.
Yeah.
Very conducive to feeling triumphant, mighty, and powerful, which is fun.
Right, because if I ever tried any of those workouts like in a public gym, I would probably just faint from the shame of it all, like, A, physically I can't do it, but B, like, who am I to thrust this bar into the air like I know what I'm doing?
I don't have the answer to that, Tom. You have the answer deep
Who am
inside
I?
you.
Who
only
am I?
only
Who are
you
you?
can answer that, Tom.
Who am I?
What about you, Jacob? When did you last feel mighty?
Yeah, so what came to mind at first didn't quite seem like it fit with what you were asking, but now that I think about it more, I think it does, and I will attempt to explain. So on this cruise that I was just on, one of the fun things that you could be involved in was a karaoke competition. So I decided to, me and my bro took part, and I ended up winning it.
Wow.
And so yes, and what made it even better is that I won by singing "Let It Go" from Frozen.
Are we ever going to be able to get away from
Nope,
the songs?
never.
Like the last few episodes,
Never.
it's just so musical heavy. Dang.
And people loved it, and I felt amazing. And I think that, like, yes, it does seem like kind of silly to win a karaoke competition on a ship, like not as like a super mighty thing. But when I like think about that, the kind of confidence that I feel like I have now that I didn't have when I was younger, and just that like being secure enough as a man to sing "Let It Go" to a crowd full of people, like that is actually like that is meaningful, and that does feel like something of value, even though from the outside might seem kind of trivial.
No, I couldn't do that. At least I don't think I could. That's amazing. What
Thanks.
So did you sing the entire song? Was it like the whole thing? Wow.
The whole thing. And I did, like, I really went all out. Like, I had hand motions, and during
It's
the
very
like
theatrical.
there's that, yes, during that little like interlude time, I actually spun around, and it was
So was your brother singing too?
I just had a lot of fun. Yes, he sang I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston,
Ooh.
which I do have recorded on video.
I was going to say, is this recorded in some
Didn't see that.
capacity, either his performance or yours?
Mine is on my cousin's phone that I have not actually seen yet, but I have my brother's on my phone, so that can be readily available to, or I'll just, I will see if like Nate wants to pay me a certain quantity of money to not release it to friends and family, then we'll see.
What's exciting? Did your brother place at all? Was there like a first, second, third thing, or was it just
So
winner?
he drew a very short straw in that the key that he had to sing his song in was Whitney Houston's key. And so it was too high for him, and then to sing it an octave lower was too low. So like he did great, and he had fun with it, but like it wasn't in a comfortable singing range. So I know that he wasn't quite feeling it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That is indeed very mighty. Like, I'm
Thanks.
proud of you.
Thanks, Tom. How about you?
As for me, mine's not as flashy. Like, I was thinking about this myself. I was like, I could say CrossFit, which is true. Like, I have felt mighty at CrossFit, but it's been several months since I did CrossFit. So I'm trying to think like, in all these months of wandering, crossing the country, going on these travels and meeting folks and going on hikes, like I'm trying to think like, was there any moment in any of that where I felt mighty? And I think honestly, what I kept coming back to was in the aftermath of my grandfather's death. My grandfather passed away a couple of months ago while I was traveling. And this was my first experience with grief, like as far as physical loss goes. I've never lost a loved one, and I've been blessed to go so long without experiencing that. And to lose my grandfather, definitely a spiritual giant, a hero in my life, someone that just always made me laugh and smile and had wisdom to bestow. In the aftermath of his death and the funeral service, there were hard moments and there was tears spilled for sure. But I also took it upon myself to let it out and to take care of myself. And I had to, it was a long story, but I had to adjust my travel plans because I had all these plans before he died to go other places. And so I had to kind of change my trajectory of where I was going on this road trip. And I decided to go up to Maine. I looked at the map and I just decided, you know what? I think Maine would be beautiful right now. I think Maine is just what I would need. And I'm going to go to Maine for a week and just climb things and disappear and turn things off and take care of myself and just kind of nurture my soul right now, because not only am I dealing with the loss of my grandfather, I'm also dealing with trying to figure out where my life is going in this season of indecision and transition. And so I went to Maine for about a week this summer, where I got those aforementioned mosquito bites and poison ivy. Like all that goodness came from Maine. So that was like an unfortunate consequence of this decision. But beyond that, there were times where I climbed trails that no one else climbed, and because it was a very touristy, crowded time to go in the middle of July. But I found some trails where no one really followed, and the sense of just like I'm accomplishing what few are daring to do was a powerful thing. And I've climbed more arduous trails than that, and I've hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I've done some other epic things. This wasn't like any kind of mammoth feat or anything. But yeah, just to be able to climb a mountain at sunset and to be able to look out and breathe and release, like that was special. It was mighty on a physical sense, but it was also mighty from the emotional as well. And so I'm grateful for my time in Maine. Maine was very special for me this summer. Mighty times in Maine.
That's awesome.
Very good.
So you guys, we finally did it. I don't know if you heard. The news broke on the Your Other Brothers Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook feeds earlier this week, but we finally hit 100 iTunes ratings and reviews at long last, and it was so exciting.
Woo-hoo!
We celebrated, yeah. We are a lot in a big celebratory mood right now because 50 episodes and now 100 reviews, ratings. This is amazing. Like, I checked it and I wasn't expecting to see 100. Like, I've been seeing for the last several weeks, if not months, I've been seeing like 80 something, 90 something, and we've been slowly crawling toward that 100 mark. And I've been expecting it for a while, but it's taken some time getting there. And so finally it happened. We're actually now at 101.
Whoa.
So that is remarkable.
And Tom, you'll thank me for this now, but none of those are me.
That's true.
So we did not, in fact, cheat to get there.
Right. Ryan joked many episodes ago that he was going to latch on to that 100th review. Yeah.
Oh, Ryan.
But I just wanted to, give a shout out to those people. We have a couple reviews that I've been wanting to read now since the news happened. And here are some of our faithful yobbers and just rando yob people who decided to comment and leave us a review. This person, Joel, he says, "What I've been looking for. I can't fully articulate how grateful I've been to discover the Yob podcast. I've been same-sex attracted since puberty and in a mixed orientation marriage for 13 years. And this whole time, I have been living in almost total isolation other than my wife. I have so longed to connect with others who are like me, followers of Jesus who are living as disciples and finding their identity in him first and foremost. I have so craved to have other men who share experiences like I have, and the podcast has been such a blessing." So,
Oh, we love you,
Joel.
Joel.
Thank you,
Welcome
Joel.
to the tribe.
welcome to the tribe. Here's another one from EduCat.
My favorite kind of cat.
EduCat 3127. They say an authentic podcast. "I'm grateful for having come across Your Other Brothers blog and podcast. I enjoy listening to Tom and Your Other Brothers discuss various topics in an authentic and vulnerable way. I was hesitant at first of giving Your Other Brothers a try since I'm a Roman Catholic Christian, and most, if not all, of Your Other Brothers bloggers come from a Protestant background. Through reading and listening to Your Other Brothers, I have found hope in one day finding other brothers and sisters that can support me as I strive to become the man God has created me to be with a rightly ordered identity and perspective with regards to handling my same-sex attraction experience." So thank you to EduCat. Yeah, a big shout out to our Catholic audience because we have a decent number. I mean, they're not as plentiful maybe as other denominations represented, but there are Catholic people in our midst, and the ones I've encountered along the way are really great people, and I'm super grateful for their perspective and what they contribute to this community.
I always feel really relieved when I get any sort of approval from a Catholic person.
We're not going to dive into the psychology of that because we don't have time for that, but I affirm your affirmation of that, Ryan. No Way Alexi.
Thank you, EduCat. Sorry.
No Way Alexi commented, and I love the subject line. The subject is V helpful. V helpful. So No Way Alexi says, "I was praying last year about my struggles with SSA and wondering how I could move forward and work on it and surrender it to God. All I could think of was telling friends I had SSA. Going beyond that, I literally had no idea. But I've been listening to this show for a while, and it's been V helpful." V meaning very, I can assume. "I have quite a bit to chew on now, and this has helped me process my own struggles while simultaneously affirming that I'm not alone. God bless y'all."
Thanks, Alexi. We're glad it's been voraciously helpful.
Voraciously helpful. We are V grateful as well. DSEX 370 just says, "Wow." So let's see what DSEX has to say. "I've struggled with SSA since I was in elementary school, and now being a freshman in college at a Christian school, I really felt like an outcast. Recently, someone introduced me to Yob, and I've listened to 4 of them the past day and a half. It is really great to hear sides about these struggles and how much I can relate to them, and having somewhere to get encouragement since I feel as though there aren't people here for me to talk to." Man, huge shout out to everyone listening from Christian schools, whether it's a Christian high school, Christian college. I've been there. I know the environment. I know the arena quite well. And so you are certainly not alone.
Amen.
And then finally, wanted to read this rating review from Jake Hell. It's a bit longer, but I love it so much. His subject line is hopeful. All of these, by the way, 5-star reviews. It's hopefully without saying, but 5-star reviews. Really grateful for every single one. J. Kel said, "Heyo." Heyo.
Heyo.
Long-time listener here. I first discovered y'all while searching on the interwebs during halftime at a Texans playoff game, probably a couple months after the podcast started. This search was one of many throughout my years as a Christian who struggles with labels, or SSA, or whatever the right word is now. Thankfully, the blog and podcast were not a mirage, but a real-life oasis, giving me a window into a world of actual people like me, at least with this stuff. I decided to review after the Letting Go episode, not because the others weren't good, but because it's the episode that answered one of my deep concerns with the Yobber Prize. I am thankful that there's a conscious shift toward the Rock of Ages himself, who has carried me and fulfilled the promises for community in his word to me time and again, especially through years of those promises sounding like despicable lies in light of what I was experiencing. A podcast centered on him and his Jesus work in your lives is worth way more than 5 stars, no matter how many small beefs I might have with certain things. P.S. Y'all have the best sponsors of any podcast I listen to. Legendary.
Aww.
So thank you, J. Kel, because your aptly timed review and your praise of our sponsors segues us perfectly into the sponsor for this episode, which is actually the sponsor for last episode, but they were waiting to, they preferred to be promoted on the second episode as more of an emphatic, like, yes, this is who we are, and we're standing up for this community and this topic. And that sponsor is Carabiners.
I love Carabiners.
Which, fun fact, when this sponsor reached out to me, I could have sworn it was Carabiners this whole time, but it's actually Carabiners.
Wow, I'm glad you got that sorted out.
So, more fun fact, I think I actually only learned what those were probably 2 years ago. I had no idea.
Really?
Yeah.
So when you went to a Buffalo Wild Wings in your cargo shorts, how else did you keep your keys attached to you?
Or did you not ever go rock climbing at
Correct.
summer camp? Or
all of these things
or
have
what else
not
are
been
they
a part
used for?
of my life. I'm so sorry.
Part of the Jacob
Indeed.
experience. Okay.
It's been a void.
Well, Jacob, you should give the sponsor a try because carabiners are great
no.
for
I
attaching
have since
strongly.
I have since
to things.
learned to love them, as they currently are holding the key to the pool and to my mailbox. So
Whoa.
Incredible importance.
Those aren't going anywhere. Those are
attached.
Secure. Yeah. So thank you, Carabiners, for not only sponsoring today's episode, but our mammoth, epic, celebratory 50th episode as well. And then finally, before we dive into this episode with our very special guest, I also wanted to give a big shout out to, I'm not going to name the name, of course, but I'm going to give a shout out to a lurker who, after listening to our last episode, decided to follow in the vein of Ryan and Jacob and become a lurker no more. And he is now a proud supporter of Your Other Brothers on Patreon. And that is just super special to me to have gotten his email and to exchange some stories with him in recent times. Super grateful for every lurker that comes out, every lurker that comes out of hiding and joins the fold, joins the community, supports what we're doing. It means a lot. So thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. If you're interested in learning more about what we do and how you can support this effort, just go to patreon.com/yourotherbros. All right, y'all. So we are continuing this conversation on emotional attachment, and we're bringing in an expert. We're bringing in somebody who can carry us out of the mud and onto higher planes of knowledge and understanding. And this is going to be so fun because we don't get to do this, and I hope we do this more often. But we're bringing on somebody to join the YOBcast. Everyone welcome Taylor Zimmerman. What's up, Taylor?
How's it going?
It's going so great. I'm so glad that you're here. Taylor, you and I have never met face-to-face, but I've seen you. I've seen you in person before at Revoice presenting. And Ryan, I think you met Taylor, correct?
Yes, we met after his workshop at the most recent Revoice.
Perfect. So at least there's some familiarity here. And Jacob, you attended his workshop as well, right?
Yeah, so I attended yours from last year.
Oh, okay.
But
yes,
yeah.
Me as well. So it's good to have you, Taylor. You presented at Revoice, so you obviously know something. You have some sort of knowledge. So rather than one of my pet peeves is when people introduce guests as if they're reading off of a script and they're just reading like who this person is. I would much rather, Taylor, you just tell us who you are. Give us like your 30-second elevator pitch. Who are you? And introduce us for those that aren't aware of who you are.
Yeah. Don't know if I would use the word expert to describe me. I think that requires years and years of research in the field to be considered an expert. Sort of a enthusiast, I think, of attachment theory. So my research, I'm a student at the University of Chicago, getting ready to start my third master's degree. I'm like a Trinitarian, master's. I just want to defer, the real world as long as possible, get all the student loans. It's fine. Yeah. And so my area of interest is philosophy of religion, theology, and psychoanalysis, and how they all come together. And part of that has led me really deep into attachment theory. And so I have presented the last 2 years on boundaries at Revoice, but largely it's how do we understand ourselves as relational human beings? How do we understand these sorts of feelings that come up when we're in deep, intimate relationships with other people? And how can we normalize the things that ought to be normalized, and then draw attention to some of the things that we can do to ease some of the anxiety in our relationships, help to get a sense of safety and security and comfort, and to ultimately have deeper, more fruitful, less anxious relationships with other people. So that's I think would be a little bit of where I kind of come from and what my sort of orientation is with that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're so glad you're here. Yeah, you may not consider yourself an expert, but let's just say you're more of an expert than the three of us. So we'll just leave it at that. Very cool. Well, I first heard about you before Revoice. You blogged a couple blogs on spiritual friendship, and that's how I found out about you. And so we'll probably reference maybe some of your writings from there throughout this conversation. But before we get any further, though, why don't we spend a couple minutes and just get to know you and pepper you with some questions, because that's what we like to do with our guests. We like to just we like to assault our guests with questions to get to know you all the better. And that's where we go. So first question is, we are definitely big into personality types here at Your Other Brothers. And so we definitely need to know Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, anything else that you feel is relevant to us understanding you as Taylor.
Yeah. I think I only know both of those. So
okay, that's
Myers. Yeah, that's great. My Myers-Briggs is INTJ. And then my Enneagram number is actually 4 wing 5. So
we are twins, Taylor. Well, almost. So I'm also a 4 wing 5, but I'm an INFJ. So
there you go.
There's a lot in
actually
common.
I think that I am the unique and special snowflake, and no one is like
Jacob, what do you have to say about
Spoken like a true 4. So yeah, I tend to argue with people who think that they are an INFJ, but there's really only one like real INFJ in the world, and so I'm helping others find their true selves when they think they're
Yes.
You're actually an ESTP.
You don't know what you are. Just listen to me. I'll help you out.
What's your background or history with like Christianity?
Like sort of like what is my life put into narrative form in the form of a testimony?
Well, I don't know. I guess like what I'm curious about is like what kind of a church do you go to, or like how does that play into maybe parts of your story? I don't need like I'm not asking for a whole life story because Tom's just gonna edit it out. I'll just get a picture for like how we can connect with you in spiritual terms.
Yeah. How did you guys talk for 5 hours and you only have 30 minutes? So I grew up, or I didn't grow up in the church. So my family is not religious, was sort of this angsty atheist kid, came to faith in a United Methodist church, then discerned a call into ministry, went to seminary, really became passionate about theology. And so during this time, I went from being United Methodist to transitioning into the broader Anglican communion. So I would identify sort of theologically as Anglo-Catholic, love all the smells and bells of worship. I said that to someone once,
That's
and
great.
he sort of grimaced, and he said, "What do you mean by smells of worship?" Just in sense. Yeah, and so right now I attend Episcopal Church because it's within walking distance of my apartment in Chicago. Yeah, I would put myself in the sort of broader high church Anglican communion.
Okay. Do you like board games?
I've only played a few. Are you a connoisseur?
Oh man, is he?
I have played a few also.
A few.
He played a
Like
few
3?
last week. Yeah.
So you said that you currently live in Chicago.
Yes.
What are your most and least favorite parts of living in the Windy City?
So I don't have a car, and so I walk to get groceries. I use a lot of the mass transportation. It's very colorful. It's very lively. There's a different culture on each block, and I think that's one of the really exciting things about Chicago is there's always something new and different, and there's a lot of energy to the city. I think that might also be one of my least favorite parts about the city. I grew up in the suburbs, and I like to just go drive somewhere and to get away from the city. And it's really hard to do that when you're right there, smack dab in the center of everything.
Yeah, and if you don't have a car, it does make it tough to go drive places.
Yes,
that's challenging. Part 2 of that is: have you seen any musicals there? And what is your favorite musical?
So.
Musicals / sporting events. Let's put those both out there. There you go.
Yeah.
So everything's covered. Yeah.
You can ask that later, Tom. This is my time.
This is my time. I actually have to say that I have to confess that I saw my first musical for the first time 2 weekends ago.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so it wasn't even in Chicago where Hamilton is currently playing right now. So yeah, I told my friend, I said, yes, I am officially gay now.
You have arrived.
Yes. Like I can finally get that coveted gay card, you know.
The one that everyone wants. Yes.
The one that gets you
Super
discounts
coveted.
on your mimosas.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. What musical was it?
Newsies.
Ooh, that's an excellent one.
It was really good. I was jamming to it afterwards.
Yes, good.
Well, very good. Does everyone feel like they sufficiently know Taylor now after the last 5 minutes? You feel satisfied? Yeah. We could probably talk all day about just random things. That would be a great show too. But while we have you, we definitely want to pick your brain and just like dig a little deeper, because on our last episode we started talking about emotional attachment and shared some stories about some people that we've attached to in healthy ways and others that we've attached to in not so healthy ways. And we have plenty of life experience to draw from with the 3 of us, and now undoubtedly the 4th person joining this show right now. So before we start out though, so we're talking about attachment theory and attachment styles. That's kind of the direction we're going. We're taking it a little more psychological, academic. Still going to be sharing stories throughout this episode, no doubt, but wanted to give it more of a framework, I guess, as we continue diving into this. So Taylor, do you just want to like open up and just kind of start defining some terms for us and just kind of get us going on this wonderful adventure?
Yeah, sure. So attachment theory is a big, major theory within psychological research. And it really is this idea that the early relationships that you have in your family unit, the child with the mother, and how intimate and connected the two are, really then later affects how the child grows up and interacts with other human beings and other relationships. And so if they had a good, soothing caregiver, they largely see themselves as valuable, as wanted, as desired, and as being able to love other people in the same capacity. And so a good caregiver and a good connection with that caregiver can lead to healthy adult relationships as those patterns continue into adulthood. Of course, the other side of that is that when the caregiver isn't connecting to the child, isn't there and present with the child, does lead into negative patterns and has negative effects on adult relationships. The two major thinkers within attachment theory, historically, the father and the mother of attachment theory, would be John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And John Bowlby had observed children that had been in British hospitals, that had been taken away from their family, that had some sort of illness, they were recovering from this illness. And he noticed that they had these certain responses to being removed from their families. And so it got him into thinking a little bit more about the role of attachment in health and vitality. Mary Ainsworth, she lived outside of the United States and observed different cultures and different ways of seeing how mothers interacted with their children, and sort of began this hypothesis of what does it mean to have this good attachment, and what do these attachment effects look like? So the big famous study, and several people outside of the psychological disciplines have heard of this study. It's called A Strange Situation. And it's a little complicated, but I'll just distill it really quickly. Mary Ainsworth did it, and she invited these mothers with children that were about 2 years of age to come and participate in this study. And so she asked these women to come with their children into this room. The child would start playing with some toys. Then a stranger would walk in and sit with the mother there in the room. The mother would leave, and they would observe the reactions of the child. And then the mother would come back in, and they would observe the actions of the child. And so the focus was what happens when you're in an unfamiliar environment, when stress is a little bit high, and how would you respond to the stress, and then also what happens when the caregiver comes back. So she started to observe these reactions of these children, and she noticed that she could divide them up into three major camps. So the first camp of these kids, she saw that when the mother left, the kids would start crying and crying, looking for their attachment caregiver. The mother would come back in, they would run to the mother, be comforted by the mother, and then go back to playing. So she identified these kids as being a secure attachment style. So it's normal to experience anxiety when your caregiver's gone. And then once the caregiver came back, they saw the caregiver as somebody that they could flee to for comfort and security and safety. The second group she noticed was this group of kids who, when the parent would leave, the kid would just continue playing. And it's almost as if the mother had never really left. The kid would keep going on and not really paying any attention. The mother would come back in, and the kid would really not respond at all to the mother. He or she just didn't seem to even notice that the mother had disappeared. And so she identified this group as the avoidant group. A common misconception is one might think, wow, like this actually seems like a really good thing. Like these kids aren't responding, their stress isn't high, they seem to be managing this really well. But the problem that Ainsworth later found out was that when they took the children's blood pressure, when they hooked them up to these biometrics in later studies, they found that the kids were experiencing just as much stress and anxiety as the first camp was, but they were unable to communicate that. They were unable to seek comfort in that. And they were really unable to recognize that within themselves. The third camp is the ambivalent-preoccupied camp. And so this camp of kids, they were even louder in their cries and then their stress response and their anxiety and anger and frustration when the mother left. And then when the mother would come back in, they would often run to the mother and would refuse to be comforted by the mom. They would sometimes beat the mother, they would punish the mother. And it was this, this sort of, you left me and you're not a safe person for me, and now I'm punishing you for leaving me. The fourth camp, which Ainsworth did not identify, there were a few that she sort of left as stragglers. Mary Main, another theorist, came in after her and identified this as the disorganized camp. So these kids were primarily victims of trauma, and so they had a wide variety of responses. Sometimes they would start walking towards the mother after the stress response and then just stop. Or sometimes they would wet themselves, or sometimes they would just stare vacantly and they just didn't know what to do. It's typically the result of when the mother is seen as something that the child wants, someone who the child wants to go to, but is really unable to feel comforted by this person who's abusing them, who is hurting them. Mary Main is the one who actually took these into adulthood, and so she developed the adult attachment style, the adult attachment inventory, and so these sorts of early patterns develop themselves into adult attachment issues. And so the avoidant person as the adult is somebody who will experience high amounts of anxiety, but won't be able to communicate that, won't be able to handle that well, needs to block it all out, needs to deactivate, to pull away from themselves and pull away from the things that are causing them stress. The ambivalent person, the ambivalent attachment style, is one where there is a hyperactivation of the attachment system. And so this adult will immediately seek proximity to somebody that can comfort them, and will be overly preoccupied with what that person is thinking and doing and where they are. And so you'll hear things like, I just think about them all the time, and I'm just really scared all the time, and I wonder what they're doing, and I have these sort of elaborate fantasies in my mind of they're hanging out with so-and-so and not hanging out with me, and they're laughing at me, or those sorts of things. It's this constant seeking out and thinking about one's attachment, the person that one has attached to. So that, I think, would be a good sort of preliminary understanding. I'll pause here and see if you guys want to add anything or question.
Pencils down. Now we're going to have a pop quiz on everything. Yeah, no, that was amazing. And it was great because I just recently reread through your posts on spiritual friendship, and we'll post a link to those for our listeners to check out. But there's a nifty little chart, like anxiety and avoidance and arrows and things, and it helps to like get a visual. If you're a visual learner, to like kind of be able to see like all these quadrants and all these things that are different, unique to different upbringings and different styles. Something that, and you guys can chime in too, I don't want to be the person like leading this conversation, but something that I immediately want to jump into is this concept of our relationships in childhood affecting friendships today. Because to me, that's so wild to think that my relationship with my mom and my dad when I was 6 years old has any correlation with my friendship today with a 35-year-old man. Like that, to me, at first, that sounds ridiculous, but I'm curious to like dive into that a little bit. I'm curious if you guys, Jacob and Ryan, what are your thoughts on that, on your childhood bonds with your parents or your caregivers relating to friendships today?
That was going to be my question too, is how does the childhood experience kind of translate to adult life? Because when you describe those different attachment styles, I can identify like certain people that I've attached to in a very ambivalent way. And those are sort of like some very powerful experiences. But then I think for a lot of other relationships, I can see some of those more avoidant patterns where I need to withdraw more than the other person is expecting necessarily. So I guess my question is like, does the theory say, I had this one relationship with my caregiver, my mother, and so therefore I'm supposed to have just one sort of predominant attachment style as an adult, or is it just not that simple?
I think that I would say it's not that simple, but I can see what you're getting at. So ambivalent people, you would assume that ambivalent folks, and I'm using that as a sort of shorthand. These are not categories of people, obviously. These are patterns that we find ourselves sometimes caught.
So it's not like a personality theory. It's not like the Enneagram where like, I'm a 9 and I'm ambivalent attachment style.
Yes.
This is more like a lens through which to look at our patterns.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So a person who has an ambivalent attachment style, you would assume that they would attach to somebody that has an ambivalent attachment style. So, great, you love high intensity, you love all of this excess, surely you're going to be attached to somebody who shares that same propensity. But actually, when we are around, if I am an ambivalent person, and I'm around somebody who also is an ambivalent person, they sort of hold, in a sense, a mirror up to my own kind of personality, my own self, and often make me really uncomfortable with their excess. And so I see a lot of the excess that they have, a lot of the excitement they have, a lot of the desires that they have, and might start to pull away as an attempt to balance that out. So we tend to balance the energy of another person out. If they're showing us a lot of extra intensity, we'll back down a little bit. And so that's not to say that necessarily that sort of response there might be then an avoidant attachment style, but rather it's in these specific contexts I might pull back or shift the power dynamics in the relationship a bit, so that I'm sort of balancing out this other person's intensity.
Okay.
That is super interesting, because you just put into words something that I've experienced all of my life and have never been able to actually articulate it in such a beautiful way. And so it's oh yeah, that's exactly how I live
Because Taylor's
and operate.
an expert.
Wow.
Taylor's a wizard.
He has earned all three of those masters.
Yeah. I was curious, Ryan, you touched on it. I've definitely experienced those ambivalent traits with people, and then also the avoidant traits with people. And I was curious, am I normal is essentially the crux of what I'm trying to ask. But do people generally exhibit one over the other, or they borrow a smorgasbord? They just borrow bits and pieces of all the different styles of attachment depending on the person? Because for me, just to start adding some context to it, for me, I definitely notice ambivalent attachment styles with straight men in my life, and more avoidant patterns with gay or SSA identifying men in my life, for various reasons. We can dive into that, but that's what I've noticed as I've been reading your stuff and listening. Even now, I noticed that so clearly in those two particular camps of people. So what do you think that's about?
Well, there are some theories within attachment theory that say that we might have one for more intimate relationships, or one with maybe one more in our family, and then one in our general relationships, or our general kind of intimate relationships outside of the family. So there are some ideas that we might be embodying different attachment styles in those respects. I think there is something to say. There might be something to say about, one of the dynamics that you brought up is something that I have heard from people before. It's the unavailability of the person often kind of stokes within us more of a desire for their attention, and so it makes sense that if this person is sort of deemed unavailable, or they pull away from you in some unconscious ways, as straight men, might be prone to do with gay men, there is this, there might be this desire to hyperactivate the attachment system, because it feels like the other person is pulling back and pulling away. And so there might be some of those ambivalent responses towards that. Whereas with folks who might be moving closer to you and more kind of interested in you, and more desirous of a friendship with you, you might feel more like this kind of, okay, now I need to pull away and withdraw, and you mentioned that you were an Enneagram 4, and so there's a dynamic of withdrawing a little bit and having that kind of space and separation in a relationship, to make sure that you can still be a full person and still be a self that has your own that understands who you are and has your own feelings and thoughts and needs and things like that, outside of this kind of coupling that might happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm squirming in my seat right now, because what you said about unavailability, kind of stoking those longings for closeness and those ambivalent patterns. Like I found myself complaining a lot recently about, why do all the people that I want to be closest to, like, why are they always so unavailable? And like maybe it's a correlation and causation thing where like those are just the people that kind of draw out that kind of attachment drive for me.
Yeah, I definitely think that tends to be a component in a lot of people's lives. Just to potentially sort of reframe a bit, sometimes I think that there is a healthy level of, sometimes we make it seem like, okay, I need to either, settle for this, these groups of people who might be unhealthy or who might want things from me that I can't give them, or I need to constantly like reach for the stars and then just constantly be disappointed. I think there is sort of a mystery there and a place for tension and a place to say, some of the deepest relationships that we can have with folks, there is a separateness that it has to be there. And there still is this kind of longing for more, and that it's actually okay to long for more, and it's okay for more intimacy and more connection.
Yeah.
One thing that I think that you mentioned this during your talk at Revoice last year is that one of the tendencies when we're talking about different attachment styles is that we hear these things, and some of the first things that we think of, like, oh, like so and so really needs to listen to this or to read this because, like, oh yeah, like this is them, and if like they just understood what their problem was, then like they could fix it, and then everything would be great. And I get the idea that that's not helpful, and that I think that like when it seems like when it comes to understanding that it's much more important for us to understand ourselves and how we operate in these things and work out from there. But my question for you is, as a person who has thought more about these things than probably anyone else in your whole world, maybe not, do you find it in just like your like everyday interactions and people that you love and want to be close to, is it difficult to not like be always wanting to teach people of like, hey, like this is what you're doing, and can we like you need to know what you're doing so that we can fix things? Is that something that ever like that you find challenging in your life?
That's what I feel, by the way, every time I encounter somebody who doesn't know the Enneagram. Like, if they just knew why they are the way that they are, it would make our relationship so much better.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's a level of that is to say, I feel like I have grown so much. I have developed so much. I have lowered my anxiety. I've been able to understand my attachment style or my Enneagram type or my Myers-Briggs, and it's helped me in my life. I want you to experience the same joy. I want you to experience the same growth that I do. And so I think part of that desire is this very kind of good, like, yeah, I really want to help the people in my life to flourish and to grow. There is another element of that could be, instead of solving my own anxiety or instead of working through my own anxiety or angst about a situation, I would put that onto the other person, and I would make them responsible for that. And if they could just fix their behavior, then I wouldn't be so upset.
Sure.
And so I think that part of it might be a little problematic, especially because you can't force another person to change their behavior,
what?
to love you or to, those sorts of things. I definitely feel that tension, and that's definitely something that I work through all the time, and something that I process through all the time, and something that I think, Taylor, are you dominating the situation? Are you controlling this person? Are you making assumptions about what's best for them? Are you allowing them to just be and allowing them to feel safe and to feel seen? But a lot of times in sort of attachment, in the attachment world, it's far easier for me to be able to interact with the other person with the attachment style that I might be picking up on with them. And so, for somebody who potentially has an ambivalent attachment style and is expressing a lot of anxiety and is very upset, potentially with me or directing that energy at me. I really want to know what you're doing and where you're going and everything that's going on with you. And this is sort of a little bit of what I talked about in my talk on boundaries is that I'm not going to say to them, wow, you're just like way too much and you need to understand that this is the kind of system that you belong in and that you need to get yourself help, things like that, which I didn't hear you as like, implying or saying, but I'm just sort of being dramatic for dramatic sake. I'm not going to say that because part of working through my own healing is to be able to look at a person like that and say, I don't like this behavior. It hurts my feelings. It makes me feel kind of suffocated. It is a little bit much. But the reason why this person is doing that is because they're scared that I'm going to abandon them. They're scared that I'm leaving them, that I don't care about them, that I don't love them. And so how can I demonstrate for them that I see them and that I recognize them while also maintaining some boundaries, right? And so to say, Joe, I understand that you're really upset right now, or I understand that things are really, really hard for you right now. I understand that you're scared. But it's not okay to text me at 3:00 in the morning, or something. I got into a conflict with someone the other day, and it was just an ability to say, hey, like let's talk about it at this time. Let's talk about it a little bit later. We can both calm down, cool off, think about it a little bit, and then process it again in a few days, and then. That lets them kind of ease through their anxiety because they can say, okay, I can point to a time that we're going to talk about it. And then it helps me because I can have some space, Mm-hmm. So maybe that's my long rambly answer to the question.
I've learned over the years that maybe this is just for me or maybe this is for everyone. I don't know. But working through conflict, texting for me used to be so convenient. Like, I hate talking on the phone, so I'm just going to text everything that I feel about this person right now. And it doesn't translate well generally. I mean, maybe I'm just flawed and I can't text through conflicts properly. But I've learned over the years to, working through conflict with people, however I'm attaching or not attaching to them in the right or not right ways is to, and depending on the person too, I've also learned to, does this person, does a phone call work? Is it worth meeting them in person, face to face, if that's possible? Some people like to be prepped that like a heavy conversation is coming. Other people prefer to just like on the spot, like let's just, there's something to talk about, let's talk about it. And I've kind of learned to like not throw in needless anxiety into the relationship if I can possibly avoid it. So that's important.
Yeah. And it also should be recognized that, or I should make it more explicit, that a lot of these things get amped up. And so people rarely go 0 to 60. It's they try to connect and then they get rebuffed, and they try to connect again and they get rebuffed. And so the kind of hyperactivation, the large amounts of emotion from the ambivalent person is because they have tried and they have tried and they have tried to connect with you over and over and over again, and are not feeling heard. They're not feeling seen, and so they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then unfortunately, what often happens is when people around us get bigger, we get smaller, and we then start to fear their reaction. We get really upset. Why are they so angry? Why are they so emotional right now? And we want to shut it down rather than name it. And so, of course, when, I don't know where you guys fall in terms of these scales of attachment styles, but if any of you have had the experience of just feeling like you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, when it looks like somebody is like scared of us, or they're scared of our response, or they're getting smaller, or they want to kind of offer us easy answers, it actually stresses us out more, which only makes us get even bigger. And so when when people are giving us those sorts of responses, it's easier for us to say, it might be easier for us to want to pull away from them, but by kind of matching their energy, being able to see them and empathize with them, even if you don't want to, really does help them to process through the kind of emotional state that they're in and better love and care for you.
Yeah, that's good.
Where has this been all of my life?
I have a quick question. If I recall correctly, is there a study indicating that these anxious attachment styles like ambivalent and avoidant have a higher rate of incident with non-straight people?
Yes, and specifically the one that I mentioned in my talk was, I think her first name is Christine. I can't remember her last name. It's actually on the spiritual friendship article that I wrote. But her research was specifically about our community, the Side B community. And she found that there were far more people that were ambivalent and that fourth category of disorganized in our community.
That's super interesting to me.
Why is that? Do you have any theories, or do you have any anything that our listeners could be like, yes, that's me?
I think some of it has to do with people in our community grow up with a lot of rejection and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain, and our natural bids for connection are often seen as either sort of perversely sexual or inappropriate, or just not the way that friends should be, or things like that. And so it's understandable why we would then be very afraid and very scared of connecting, and then why our attachment system might amp up, and why we might be overly preoccupied with our relationships, overly intense in our relationships, because we're constantly looking for that ideal that we think is out there, that we believe that everybody else has, that we can't ever put our hands on.
That makes a lot of sense. That the communities we grew up in kind of prime us for that ambivalent style. And I think even I can see the problem being worse in churches or Christian communities, but I could see that also being just a problem that the broader community has as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was noticing this, that study that you referenced, and another chart. I love charts and numbers and graphs and all those things. And so, I noticed there was essentially 75% are in this anxious, insecure attachment styles, with a whopping 48% in the preoccupied. Is that the ambivalent one? Is that what that one is? Okay, gotcha. That's interesting to me. So basically, half of our community fall into that camp.
Yeah.
So that's a huge number.
Yeah. I didn't mention this before, by the way, and this is sort of a fun fact for you, but there's an identity, there's a label that's given for each attachment style that is both an emotional label, and then there's one that's a cognitive label. So there is the preoccupied, which is primarily cognitive, and then the ambivalent, which is feelings.
Gotcha.
Then there's the avoidant and dismissive. So from where you know.
Okay. That's helpful.
So far we've talked about some healthy responses to these attachment styles, like working through those conflicts you mentioned, or setting good boundaries. And those are really helpful, but is there a sense of being able to grow in your kind of default attachment style, like being able to become a healthier baseline person so that you don't have to necessarily go through this whole process every time you become attached to someone?
Yeah. So this is some of the debates about attachment theory, and can you work through your attachment style. Some of our community have misunderstood, I think, some of the literature about this. So I've heard people say that the argument is between, can you change or can you not change? But everybody believes that you can change, and everybody believes that there is some sense of security that you can get to. The question is, do you fully get rid of your attachment style and then fully assume a secure attachment style? Or do you maintain some of those sort of remnants of your early childhood attachment style? And so what this might look like on the practical level is you might still find yourself getting really anxious when your attachment figure isn't around, but you're not engaging in that punishing behavior or deactivating behavior that might be present with either of those two attachment styles. I think actually, Ryan, you brought this question up at my talk.
Yeah.
And so it's called the earned secure attachment. And so you can earn secure attachment. A nice image that is in attachment literature. I think David Wallen talks about this. He's a psychologist, and he draws this sort of image of a little girl, and every time she comes home from school, she runs through this field to get home. And there is this tree in the middle of this field. And as she's running by, she smells this really sweet smell coming from the tree. So she runs over to the tree. She reaches her hand inside this opening in the tree, and she gets bitten by this animal. And so she recoils her hand and is crying and goes home and is comforted. And the next day, she was running through that same field. She smells that sweet smell from the tree and goes over, reaches her hand inside, and then she gets stung by a bee or something. Really upset again, leaves. And then again, each time she does that, she keeps getting injured. So let's say this happens. Maybe, this girl is just, the representation of that Einstein quote. And so she just keeps doing it over and over and over again. And so let's say that it happens like 50 times, right? So she might, at this point, say all trees are bad. All trees are deceptive. They have this sweet smell that's coming from it. And I know that I'm always going to get hurt. I know that they'll draw me in, but eventually something bad is going to happen. But let's say that the 51st time she is running through this field and she sees this tree and she smells this smell again. And everything within her says, don't go to the tree, don't go to the tree. But she decides that she's going to be brave and courageous or foolish, and try again one last time. And so she reaches her hand inside and she pulls out this honeycomb. And then she eats this honeycomb and enjoys this honeycomb. And there's something then really great about this tree. And it has finally given her this sort of blessing, right? And so from then on, this little girl is really unable to say that all trees are bad. She still is going to carry with her the wounds of the 50 trees that she interacted with before. But because of this one experience of healing, her life is forever changed. And this is actually, if I could just speak sort of on a more personal level for a moment, this is actually one of the things that I think is really beautiful about this sort of relational therapy and how this functions in light of Christianity, and especially within attachment theory, is attachment theorists will say that secure people tend to attach to secure people. Insecure people tend to attach to insecure people, and insecure people will make the other insecure person worse. And so the anxiety tends to be exacerbated within that relationship. Secure people and secure people will make each other better. But when an insecure person attaches to a secure person, they only get better. And so there's always something just positive that happens. There's always some place for you to grow into. And so even just one healing experience where you feel yourself seen and safe and soothed and secure, where, instead of the typical you're overreacting or you're always shutting down, you're a robot, or, I just feel like you're always too much and too concerned with what I'm doing, but rather this kind of turning towards and this opening oneself up. Just one experience like that actually radically changes how we think about ourselves and we think about the other person, and helps put us on this path towards earned secure attachment.
Yeah, I mean, that description right there totally reminds me of a story I shared on our last podcast with the first straight man that I ever came out to, befriended, started being vulnerable with, because up until that point, I was 23 at the time. And for essentially 23 years, straight men for me were just kind of the unknowable, the approachable, and I just kept my distance from them because any interaction with them was either, it was basically bullying or nothing, and so I'd rather have nothing. And I was able to finally, at that juncture, certainly feel like I was an insecure and unhealthy person latching onto somebody who I perceived as strong and secure, and for at least for a summer, I mean, there was challenges that summer of working with him, but I felt myself becoming a healthier person. And so then the challenge for me was then the ongoing nature of a friendship beyond a summer job that we were constricted at. And so then, how often do I text? Do I text too much? Do I not text enough? And then there's like all these second guessing of like, how do I maintain the relationship, which ultimately that friendship didn't pan out, but I'm grateful for it because it gave me a sense that like not all trees are bad. I love that image that like, I could have just assumed all straight men suck, and maybe a lot of them do, but there's also some really great ones, and I've established some better ones in, I would say, the last 2 years especially. That's been a huge part of my story, is like learning that not all straight men are awful, and that also I can grow as well, and that I can become a healthy, secure person, and hopefully contribute something to the relationship too. But like go ahead, Ryan.
Well, were you gonna continue with your story, or
I was just gonna actually quote Taylor.
okay?
Were you finished yet?
No, I just wanted to tie a bow on it. Yeah, well, so like while I'm talking about this particular straight friend, I really love this part of one of your blog posts from Spiritual Friendship, because it talked about straight men and kind of the dynamic at play between their side of things and then gay celibate SSA people on the other side of things. Talking about men, you said men are socially expected to give up their friendships for the sake of their romantic relationships because masculinity is strongly connected with sexual behavior. The tragedy, then, is that where straight men may feel the same attachment anxiety for their male best friends that their gay peers feel, they can disavow their anxiety in favor of pursuing their romantic relationship. Celibate gay men cannot. And I've felt that so hard in my life, as I'm sure many of our listeners can as well, that it almost feels like they have extra outlets to pour and energies to pour into, but because we have, these convictions and because we are who we are, it's kind of, we feel limited in that capacity.
Yeah, when you said when you used the term earned secure attachment, I thought immediately about my relationship with my friend Micah, who also I talked about in the last episode, where that relationship started out as kind of like me in this ambivalent attachment place with just a lot of anxiety. And this is kind of my pattern with a lot of my super close guy friends, is that the relationship for a long time has this period of like, anxiety and fear. And like, I feel like I'm just on the edge of my seat the whole time, like not sure where this is going. Like, how can I make sure this goes where I want it to go? How do I not lose this person? But over the years, like I've grown out of that with Micah, and that's why I especially love the word earned in front of that, because it does feel very earned. And I think you're right that as I worked through that, and I think he does have a very healthy attachment style, a very secure attachment style. And I have seen how that's kind of like provided me with some growth in my other relationships, where I think I am not I'm starting from a better place for other relationships now that I've gone through that process with Micah. So I think that image of secure people and insecure people kind of making each other better, like I feel like that's been true, at least there. And and so I'm really thankful for that.
I think it was in the third part of your post, you touched on how oftentimes people in our community, when we get to the point that we could use the phrase where it feels like we are falling in love with a person, that those kind of feelings end up like they like taint, they ruin that that friendship. And I think that's something that I know in my own life, in like I will hear from people, like other friends, that almost the the advice that I will get is that like once you start to have those kind of feelings, that means that you need to just to cut it off completely. Like it's just like it's almost like you talked about this fear of kind of like reaching that point of no return, that you've like gotten there and now like everything's ruined, that there isn't any hope of coming back from that. And you gave the kind of the case study of a gay man and a straight man, and I would be curious to hear more of your thoughts of like what kind of like words would you speak into the case study of two side B gay men who fall in love with one another.
Yeah, I think there are some similarities, of course, and so one of the things that I talked about in that trio of articles, and you all are so kind to have read that. It was, looking back, it's so verbose, and
there was just like one quick thought. There was a part during part 1 that I was reading it, and you were using words and sentences that just like way over my head.
Wow,
to where
knows so much.
To where I thought like I'm not worthy to talk to this man. Like we're on different planes of existence. Like I'm gonna sound so dumb because he's way up here in the heavens and I'm down like a worm. Okay, sorry. Please go on.
Thank you, Worm.
Yep.
I think it was a little bit of my own anxiety I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, you did.
So maybe looking back, I could have edited a little bit, but
no, I will say the further you go, it's like super I applied so much to my life. I was reading your descriptions of these styles and I was like, oh yeah, I can think of 7 friends right now that I've attached to in this way, and I can think of other people who've attached to me in this way, and it was just like, I don't know. I found it easy to connect with.
Awesome, good. So the question of what is the difference between what falling in love might look like when it's one party sort of that has fallen in love with this other person that has not reciprocated in some capacity. So the gay man and the straight man, and then versus 2 gay men. So something that I did mention in my article is I think a lot of times we confuse falling in love for have a lot of attachment anxiety towards this person, and so I think I think it's good, not only in the sense to say, I had a counselor who actually introduced me to attachment theory and helped me process through a lot of stuff, and he always used to say, Taylor, you're not as amazing and wonderful as you think that you are, but you're not as terrible as you think that you are either. And so, you're somewhere in between. But what he was doing was he was trying to say, we shouldn't have these sort of lofty ideals that the love that we have. When I saw that person at Revoice and he looked at me and said, "Did you drop this on the floor?" I knew immediately that we were going to be in a committed celibate partnership forever. Moved to Vermont, started B&B, the gay dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's sort of a little bit of a sense to say, maybe you don't love this person as much as you think that you do. But there also is this component of it to say, but you do have real feelings for this person. There is something that's there. There is some sort of foundation of a relationship, and just how do you work through the anxiety of it? And so, in the sort of gay straight model, that would be working through this sort of emotional capacity of it, and you might be. You would have to deal with some sexual elements of it if you did find yourself sexually attracted to the person, and to sort of say, what do I do if I'm having some sort of physiological response when they do show me intimacy, when I am sort of getting that chaste platonic intimacy, but for some reason I'm still having this sort of physiological or sexual response. So you'd have to process through that on that level. And I think the added component to the sort of gay male and gay male model is if you both feel that way about each other, there is more of a tendency for emotions to just kind of become far more heightened. And so you'd have to be, I think, more aware of some of those dynamics about the kind of heightened intensity of relationships and how you're working towards having that sense of security and safety and comfort in the relationship. I think one of the major differences in relationships with gay men versus relationships with straight men is with gay men there is a more of an openness to intimacy, and so they're far more comfortable with expressing loving feelings of affection towards you. They're far more comfortable with physical affection, and so it just might lead to kind of a heightened emotional intensity to where I've often, when you talk publicly about boundaries for 2 years in a row, people come to you and they tell you their stories and sure. You help them process through it as best you can. And so I have heard a lot of stories within our community of folks who have these kind of like big firework like relationships that fizzle and blow up after maybe like a month or two, right? Because they're so intense that they just can't handle it. So my recommendation with all sorts of relationships, especially covenantal relationships, is that it's always a good idea to back into them. And so pay attention to your own sort of intensity, your own desires, and be really gentle and slow with yourself to say, I like this person and that's okay. And I can receive that and hold that openly. But also at the same time, we have only known each other for, this period of time, or at the same time, there are aspects about their life that I don't have access to, et cetera. Does that somewhat get at your question?
Yeah. I would think that, so having given talks about boundaries, I would think that lots of people are just wanting you to tell them, like, here's a list of things that you should be able to do that are good things, and here's a list of things that you shouldn't do, and just make it like super super clear. But obviously it's much more complicated than just like, here are all the like do's and don'ts of, now if you just do these, then you'll be great.
Yeah. I think I did preface my talk both times and say, like, this isn't going to be a talk about sexual boundaries in the sense that I tell you, like, this is how far you go, right?
Sure. Yep.
I think I would say, like, one of the particular issues with our community is that our churches don't. Not only do they not help us, but they don't even know how to. Right? It is part of the kind of the new terrain that we're all trying to work through is we're figuring this out along the way as well. Like, we don't think these old models of how to approach relationships work. We recognize that there are major pitfalls and we don't want to fall into them, but we are sort of taking a machete through this jungle, trying to kind of carve our own path. It's sort of a very manly, masculine image.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of us want the people in our lives to just kind of tell us what to do, but a lot of it is just, and I think people get really uncomfortable with this dynamic, but a lot of it is really trusting your own discernment and to say, I can discern well, and I am going to invite other people to help me discern well, and this is how I'm going to process this and figure it out.
I have a question that kind of comes from the other direction. So when I was first learning about attachment theory and thinking through all this and applying it to past situations in my life, I'd be like, oh, Jordan was avoidant and John was avoidant and this person is avoidant, this person is avoidant. And then and that was vindicating, but then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, what if they just weren't attached to me? What if I don't know, what if, because I think in my kind of ambivalent state, or just my in the midst of my anxiety or how much I wanted from the relationship, I sort of overestimated how invested they were in the relationship. And so I guess my question is like, how can we kind of identify the difference in another person of like, oh, they're invested in the relationship, they're just displaying this avoidant attachment style, versus like, yeah, you need to kind of, chill out on the level of they're not super interested in that kind of friendship with you.
Yeah, like that he's just not that into you.
Not into you.
Right, yeah.
Yes, I was thinking that too.
I mean, that is a really good question, because I think that sort of touches on a little bit of our core fears, right? Is that maybe I have invested so much in this relationship with this person, and maybe this relationship has wholly been one-sided. I don't know you that well, Ryan, but you do not strike me as someone who's incredibly delusional, that you imagine yourself to
we
be-
have some stories to share.
You just wait, Taylor. Just kidding. Not at all.
And so I think there is a component of it that if you, I would say that if you have been feeling a lot of ambivalence in these relationships, you've been feeling this sense of attachment to them, I think that already is indicative that there is an attachment relationship.
Okay.
One of the things that avoidant people tend to do, and we don't always notice it when we're in it, is they'll sort of tease you a little bit, and they do it unconsciously. And so it's not something that they're intentionally thinking like, I'm going to do this, but they'll tease you a little bit to sort of get you back interested in them and expressing a lot of affection towards them, so that they can then withdraw. And so if they sense that you are distancing yourself from them in some capacity, they might respond by just kind of tiptoeing a little bit closer, doing something that might, prick your excitement a little bit, and then withdraw once you've responded accordingly. And so, I've seen situations where it's if you haven't talked to this person in a while, this person won't tell you, hey, Ryan, we haven't chatted in a while. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? But they might send you like a funny meme on a text message. And so it's this like small little hey.
Like, give the dog a bone.
Yeah. And then to which point, I don't know if you have responded this way, but to which point someone that has an ambivalent attachment style might be like, oh wow, like he's like really into me again, and like, oh,
he
this
reached
is like
out,
yeah.
he's pursuing me.
And then sort of back in, right? And so it's this game where one person, and this is why you're so right to say like earning secure attachment is so hard, because one person really does have to be the person who holds a ton of tension in the relationship, if you're in a relationship with two insecure folks.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because someone who's not that attached to you is not gonna like throw out those little like that bait, and so that even just hearing that helps me sort of categorize a few past relationships as like one or the other. So that's good.
You made a comment at the beginning about the desire to have certain norms be changed when it comes to attachment. I would be really curious to hear about, I would say, especially in our community, what are some of the norms that you would like to see changed or evolved? You were talking about, I think in how secure attachment looks in like a really healthy way, that there are certain norms that exist for men that become a hindrance to us having secure attachment, because men don't, we don't do that.
So as you're pondering Jacob's question, I also wanted to throw in, I don't know if this fits in here, but I wanted to fit it in before we ran out of time. This whole concept of arousal, if we can go there. Because you write about this in your post too, about what happens if you experience arousal with your friends. Is that like a no-no? Is that like, oh gosh, gotta discard that friendship because I can't be aroused by my male friends, and especially if they're gay, or or side B. Like I have to not pursue that any further. But I love that, like what you write about is that arousal, in many ways, it can be a pointing toward this good, legitimate desire for intimacy. And I don't know if that factors into what Jacob was saying, if that comes up at all, like, because people talk about like what lines to cross and not cross, and people talk about cuddling with other men, and people talk about just physical affection in general and how much is too much. And that's an ongoing debate that goes until the end of time of like what is okay within the confines of a platonic friendship, and what does intimacy look like for two gay or SSA identifying men? Like what is that? And so that's something that I think about too.
I think that you should skip my question entirely and just answer that one. No. I think that's better, because I also wanted to ask that too, and so just skip what I was asking earlier.
Skip to the cuddling arousal question.
Skip to the super sexy things,
the spicy stuff.
Spicy stuff. Yeah.
Right, there we go. There's a sort of a famous person within the sort of psychodynamic, psychoanalytic world who's a Christian psychologist. He teaches at the Seattle School, I think. His name is Roy Barsnez. And he shares this story about, so he's been counseling for like 30 years. And he shares this story about one of his first sessions that he had with this woman right fresh out of school, and sort of how he processed through a lot of the sort of erotic elements of this relationship. So this woman, she was sexually abused by her father. Her parents divorced, and then on her 18th birthday, I think, her father engaged in a three-way sexual relationship with her and his girlfriend. So this woman, she came across as very put together, very confident, very charismatic. She was fairly attractive, but she had all of these broken relationships with men because she would have these really intense sexual relationships with them and wouldn't really know how to process through a lot of these dynamics that she was experiencing. And so Roy Barsnez is writing about this, and he was talking about his own feelings in the session, and he starts to notice that she is dressing up more when she comes to the sessions, and she is being a little bit more provocative with him, and she starts to be more explicitly sexual with him, just talking more explicitly sexual. She describes having these sort of sexual dreams about them, and it's making him really uncomfortable because not only is he attracted to her and aroused by her, but he also won't be having sex with his client, right? Mm-hmm. And this is, fresh out of school. The textbooks did not prepare me for this. And so, but she's getting more and more sexual, and then consequently more and more violent and angry with him. And why won't you return these sort of feelings? And he acknowledges that he started cooling off and just shutting down. And so he really responded to her really analytically and cold, and she's getting more and more anxious. And she tells him one day, she says that if you won't have sex with me, then I'm going to kill myself. And at this point, he's panicking. He doesn't know what to do and what to say. Like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, how do I navigate this? And he sort of just blurts out, I don't know what to do with this. And she said, you know what? Oh God, you must be asexual or something like that. And he was like, well, as long as you and I are in this room together and have this therapeutic relationship, yes, I am asexual. And I might be attracted to you, but we're doing this work, right? And so being able to sort of name it and name this subtle underlying unconscious erotic element between the two of them actually allowed him to realize he was pulling away from her when she needed him the most. Mm-hmm. And so she had only ever learned, from these early relationships with her father, that in order to get the attention of the men in her life, in order to get affection, she had to be overly sexual. and that when they wouldn't give it to her, she would respond very violently and angrily. And so he managed to kind of process through this dynamic with her by being open to her and feeling with her, but obviously not having sex with her. And he remarks that just naming that was healing. And he said, several years later, she, he discharged her after about 5 years. She ended up getting married, having children, and she came back to him like 20 years later. And she was talking about that time, and she said, "Yeah, I'm so embarrassed. The only thing I remember is that I just really, really, really wanted to have sex with you. I really wanted you." And she said, "I'm so glad that you didn't, because I needed to have some man in my life that would make this space for me to feel this without taking advantage of me." And he said, but she said, "But I really wanted to have sex with you." And he said, but in some sense, you didn't. And she pauses and she says, "Yeah, I guess you're right. There was a deeper sense that I really actually didn't want that from you. I just wanted you to sort of make this space for me." And so one of the things that Barsness talks about in this dynamic is, can sexuality and eroticism be expressed without being exploited? And so often what happens is, when someone expresses their sexuality towards us, it's typically quickly exploited. And so it's either exploited that, we'll have sex with a person. It's exploited that they'll be mocked and made fun of. It's exploited in those sorts of capacities. Sometimes we even feel within our own self, like if I express my sexuality, or when I express my sexuality, it gets exploited. Somebody takes advantage of me. Somebody mocks me, those sorts of things. But what Barsness is talking about is can we express this? Can we hold a space for us to talk very openly about this without exploiting one another and taking advantage of this? Oftentimes in our relationships, we feel the most desirous of wanting to have sex. We feel like we want to be in a sexual relationship with somebody when they are distant. Sometimes when they're distant and we want to connect with them. Sometimes when we're filled with feelings towards them, we want that. Sometimes when we're having a bad day, we want that. And so one of the things that we often do is we'll experience this, and then immediately we'll follow it up with a no, I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't feel that way. And oh my gosh, like this is so terrible. Why is this happening? And we just shove those feelings down, which only makes us amp up even more, only makes us want to be sexually active even more, want to solve this anxiety that we're experiencing within ourselves. And so we end up creating more and more and more tension. And so sometimes, that means that you end up having sex with a person. Sometimes, more often, I think what ends up happening is we, feeling all this tension and all this anxiety. So I'm not going to, express it. I'm not going to talk to my friend about it, but I'm going to go look at porn and jerk off. Right. And so there's this, like, I need to find some way to quickly release this pent up anxiety. But, again, it kind of catches us in this cycle of then when those feelings come up again, we have to do something to solve the anxiety. And so part of our own kind of healing ought to be, can this be other aspects of my emotional experience, and be expressed in relationship? Can I feel comfortable talking to this person about, and I'm just kind of feeling a lot right now. I'm feeling this kind of intense attraction towards you. I'm feeling this high amount of kind of anxiety about this, and that be okay within the relationship, and that be held by the other person, and the other person can say, Anything from, thank you so much for telling me. Do you want to go out for a walk? Do you want to talk? Do you need a hug? I know that you've been having kind of an intense day. Like, do you want to sit down and talk about it? We, especially men, tend to do this. We have this mentality and mindset that sex is primary and it's something that I want, and I should have this above all other pleasures in life, right? But one of the fascinating things about studying eroticism and sexuality is almost every thinker that I've encountered who has talked about sex and sexuality has talked about how boring it is. And so to some effect, they either say, well, it's really boring, or like it's really isolating because it's just physical, or there's one person who said, the sex act actually suspends eroticism, right? And so it actually doesn't satisfy what you really want. And so everybody agrees, though, it's all the other stuff that goes into it that causes all of the kind of tension in our lives. And so one of the things I think we as men especially, and that's not to exclude women, there are women who definitely think of their sexuality as being primal. But one of the things that we as men have to relearn and to reteach ourselves and to remind ourselves is that sometimes when we're like, man, like the only thing that I want to do is just have sex with somebody, it's actually indicative of a deeper feeling of loneliness and isolation, and just the need to feel like there's somebody out there that loves me for me.
Yeah, like what I really want in my closest relationships, and with men, is like a relationship where my sexuality can take up space, like where I don't have to kind of like, like suck it all in, and just like not where I can relax and just like kind of like let the person see that part of me, especially as it pertains to them. And I think when we talk about physical arousal, like one thing that I've thought about, or kind of where I've landed with that, is that our body has different physiological responses to different situations and stimuli. And if you see someone who's crying, you ask, oh, well, why is this person crying? Kind of the easy answer, the obvious answer is they're sad. But is it always that? Like you could be crying for joy, you could be crying because you're confused or tired or angry. There's 100 reasons why you could be crying. And there's kind of like the iconic answer, there's like the easy answer, but it's not always that. And similarly with sexual arousal or the physical arousal that we associate with sexual arousal, like I think that, like the easy, simple answer is you want to have sex with that person. But I think it's more complicated than that. I think that our body can respond to intimacy and this longing for intimacy and affection that is not necessarily sexual or sexually driven, in very similar ways. And so that's kind of given me a lot of sort of mental space, some extra space in my head to think about my relationships and my interactions and my body's responses to different people, to kind of like have the freedom to say, okay, like, yeah, if I'm honest with myself, I don't really want to have sex with them, but my body responds in a certain way, and that's okay, because that doesn't necessarily mean like my head's lying or whatever. Like there is that room for, I just want to be close to them, or whatever.
Yeah, and adding some diversity to this conversation, like part of my story, Taylor, is that I fall somewhere on the asexuality spectrum. I'm not sure where exactly or how far or what it is. I haven't looked into it too deeply. I'm just starting to realize that about myself right now. But as of now, 32 years old, I've never wanted to have sex with anybody, with a single person in my whole life. It sounds awful. I don't want to, as of right now anyway, I don't want to ever experience that. And yet I've also experienced arousal. It's not to say I've not experienced arousal, because I most certainly have. And like I think there are people out there, I know there are people out there listening who can resonate to some degree, that just because you experience arousal isn't indicative of some like sinister thing that you have to squash or that you have to put away. Because honestly, when I experience arousal, like generally, it's with people that I care a lot about, and that's awkward to like admit and say, but there's something deeper in there that I think is really important to be aware of. And I hope that that's something that, that our listeners and people who follow us can take away, that there's such a good, we all have this good desire for intimacy, and like how can we, I love how you said we can just like, how can we name it and claim it and not name it and claim it? How can we name it and then move forward through it? Like that's the key. It's been the key for me, I would say, definitely these last few years.
Yeah, I've come more and more to recognize that being raised within the church and being raised in the context where I've seen where sex has always been in the context of a marriage, and I've seen that displayed in really good and really beautiful ways, that my own longing for sex at different times is really not for the sex, but for the context in which I know that sex is meant to be a part of. So the commitment, the partnership, the companionship, the kind of unity and like oneness that is meant to be a part of a marriage, that's what I want so much more than any physical act. But yet, like, those things, I think that as they're meant to be, those things are all meant to be connected to one another. And so like, like what you were saying about how so often that the core of our longing for that kind of physical intimacy has a root in our like feeling lonely and our longing to be seen and to be loved by a person.
Taylor, you've mentioned some different authors, researchers, and different studies. Is there like a go-to resource for like attachment theory when it comes to adults that you like recommend to people, or is it just kind of like find the studies and read them? Like what would you say?
Yeah. So the one book that I recommend to people, this is a sort of easy introduction to attachment theory, is called Attachments. I think it's the subtitle is like Why You Love the Way That You Do, or something like that, and it's by Tim Clinton and Gary Sibsey. So it's a Christian book, so there's a little bit about spirituality in that. It can sometimes be a little, there can sometimes be a little Christianese in there. So, you may need to sort of eat the meat and spit out the bones. But it's a great resource for an introduction to all the different attachment styles, talking about what they look like in relationships, and then can begin to give you some tools for how to process and work through your own insecure attachment styles. Unfortunately, a lot of the literature is on husband and wife and parent and child, and so you won't find like the guide for side B Christians.
Not until you write it, right?
Yeah,
that's in the future.
Oh gosh. But you can definitely, as I like to say that we're like, thrifty, and we're thrifty as a people group, and we sort of pick and pull together and then create. And so you can definitely find a lot of resonance with, especially the romantic partners, male and female, husband, wife. And so you can just say, okay, well, I'll just change the dynamic slightly and see what this looks like. So
awesome, thanks. I get the sense that it's customary on a podcast when you have a guest to let them plug something. Is there anything you want to plug? Do you have any books or anything, blogs?
Oh no,
a band,
MySpace profile.
A band.
Oh, yeah.
stand up routine coming up.
I did have a Zanga account before.
Ooh,
yeah.
we're in good company. Then.
Yeah, that's
I was on Zanga.
Yeah,
that's how your other brother started.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, Taylor, thanks so much for doing this, for being here. I feel enriched. I can't speak for Jacob and Ryan, but I personally feel enriched.
Absolutely.
And I think our listeners will be too. I really appreciate your taking the time to come on and share a little bit about what you know. I think, I think it's going to help a lot of people just to start to process a lot of the relationships in their lives.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. I look forward to actually like meeting you, not just as a face in the crowd, but the face to
Revoice
face.
2020.
There it is. Yeah. I'll make it a point to meet you. Yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah. Thank you, Taylor.
All right. Much love, brother.
Man, that was such a meaty episode. I felt like there was just so much great content, so much great discussion, and I'm so thankful for Taylor bringing his experience and expertise into the conversation. Like I just keep thinking of different situations and different ways to apply this, and different ways I want to apply this in like specific relationships in my life.
Yeah, there are some episodes where I'm kind of done, like I'm ready to move on, I'm ready to go to bed, or I'm ready to, change my scenery. And then there are episodes like this one where it's like, I wish we could just talk to Taylor for 5 more hours, because there's just so much good psychology at play there, but then just like sharing stories and just shooting the breeze with y'all. Like definitely one of my favorite recordings we've ever done. So really appreciate Taylor coming on, and oh yeah, Jacob and Ryan, thanks for joining us as well.
Oh yeah, us too. I was just gonna kind of echo what you said, of that it feels like we've only scratched the surface of things that he knows and like wisdom that he has, that I think that we should absolutely have him back if he'd be willing to.
If that wasn't a traumatic experience for him, if he doesn't now emotionally detach from us in a significant way, then yes, I think it would be great to have him come back again. And in the meantime, though, before that happens, in between now and our next episode, we'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this episode. So tell us about your attachment styles. I'm curious to see if this ambivalent one is as popular of a buffet option as it seems to be, based on the people in the room on this call, and then just in the study that was referenced in the episode. So check out Taylor's posts. They're all going to be linked in our show notes and on our blog. And go over to yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Find the episode 51 post, because we are now into our 50s, y'all. I don't know if you heard. But episode 51, find this podcast post and share a story. Tell us about your attachment styles or what you've noticed in your relationships with other men. We would love to share some stories and maybe learn a thing or two from each other, because that's always great. Yes, a big shout out once again to our sponsor, Carabiners, which made this entire episode possible. Yes, thank you for attaching not only climbers to rocks, but house keys to skinny jeans. Thank you for attaching in all the right ways.
Thank you, Carabiners.
Thank you, Carabiners, for providing hundreds of pounds worth of attachment. That is not ambivalent. That is not avoidant. That is secure attachment right there.
Thank you. That was great. Perfect. Our sponsors, don't we have the best sponsors too? We have great listeners.
We have
great
the best sponsors.
They are so supportive. And thanks to our listeners. Thanks to you guys for, I want once again 100 plus ratings and reviews. You guys are awesome. Thanks for getting this show. I mean, this is like super significant, these last couple episodes, to have 50 plus episodes and now 100 plus ratings and reviews. So y'all are great. Thanks for supporting the show and keeping it going. Couldn't do it without you. Y'all, this is a great episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time for more fun content. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we'll just talk about emotional attachment for the rest of our days, or maybe we'll go into something else next time.
Ooh, or we'll talk more about arousal.
Or this is the segue to talk about arousal and sex. We'll see. Stay tuned, y'all. In the meantime, for all your other brothers, this is Tom.
This is
Jacob.
Ryan. Oh, sorry.
Reminding you that you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. See you next time, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Navigate more with us at yourotherbrothers.com and comment on this episode at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Subscribe to our show to never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what we do, consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Brothers. If you'd like to further support our storytelling effort, consider becoming a Yobber. Yobbers pledge monthly and receive perks like calls with authors and other supporters, access to a secret Facebook group, and additional podcast content. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Don't miss our monthly bonus podcast on Patreon, the Yobbalog, featuring responses to previous podcasts, content not featured in public episodes, calls from listeners, and more. Ask us a question or tell us a story by leaving us a message at 706-389-8009. If you're new to the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com. You can also write us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.